It's a busy day, busy Monday here at the Pentagon. Let me run through some schedule items before I provide one announcement for you. This morning, the Secretary was pleased to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Nunn-Lugar Competitive Threat Reduction Program, where the Secretary was joined by Senators Nunn and Lugar to honor 5 individuals who have made that program such a success and made America safer in the process. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, the Secretary will honor another American who's focused much of his career on U.S. national security. The Secretary will present the Department's highest civilian honor, the Distinguished Public Service Award, to Dr. Henry Kissinger, honoring his years of dedicated service to the country, and that event also is open press. Tomorrow, Secretary Carter leaves for a trip that will take him to California and Colorado. In California on Wednesday, he'll be in Silicon Valley to visit the Department's Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX, where he will provide an update on his efforts to build bridges with the innovation economy. Later on Wednesday, he will attend a meeting of the National Security Telecommunications Advisory Committee. NSTAC is a federal partnership with major private sector entities and provides recommendations to the President on preserving vital telecommunications services in a crisis. The Secretary will be joined there by other federal officials, including Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson and Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker. And finally, on Wednesday, the Secretary will honor former Secretary of State George Shultz as the 2016 recipient of the Department of Defense Ideas Award. Again, that will happen in California on the Stanford campus, or just off the Stanford campus. On Thursday, the Secretary heads to Colorado, where he will visit the Joint Interagency Combined Space Operations Center, or JICSPOX, to discuss key space issues with the leadership team there. Later, he will speak to cadets at the Air Force Academy. And on Friday, he will attend an historic change of command ceremony where he will thank Admiral Gortney for his exceptional service as commander of NORAD and NORTHCOM, and welcome General Lori Robinson as the first female leader of a combatant command. That happens on Friday. Now, I do have one announcement for you regarding the counter-ISIL campaign. On May 6th, a coalition airstrike targeted Abu Wahib, ISIL's military emir for Anbar province, and a former member of al-Qaeda in Iraq who has appeared in ISIL execution videos. That strike near Rutba was successful, killing Abu Wahib and 3 other ISIL jihadists. Abu Wahib's death is another blow to ISIL's leadership that will further degrade its ability to operate, especially in Anbar province. And with that, happy to take a few questions. Tony.
Start off with a Syria trend and a quick question. You've got 2 reprogrammings on the Hill for $349 million. Congress has been slow to act on those. What is the status of the train and equip program in terms of how many in the second phase have been vetted to date, and what's the goal for the end of the year? I.e., why do you need the money and why should Congress give it to you?
Tony, as you know, we're not talking about specific numbers of people and not providing a disposition as to where they are right now in the program, in part for operational security. But this effort was, again, an effort to build on the problems that we saw in the first round of the Train and Equip program, learn from those lessons, and advance this program, which we think is very important in terms of enhancing those Syrian forces on the ground that are taking the fight to ISIL. And so that is why this program is moving forward again, and while we've asked for Congress's help in terms of financial support for that program, and we're going through the process of making that case to the committee. So you've heard the Secretary on the Hill talk about the importance of this and talk about the importance of getting these funds in place so that that program can be accelerated and these forces can be brought to bear in the fight against ISIL.
Look, in the first time this went around, your predecessor, Kirby, did say what the end goal was, like 5,000 at the end of a couple years ago, and he did get periodic updates. Why can't you at least give a sense of what in the second tranche are the goals and vetted to date?
Yeah, well, the goals we can talk about, but Tony, remember, this is a different program than what was originally conceived. What that was an effort to, if you will, build ground forces effectively from the ground up, a large number of forces. This is much more tailored to training and making connections with individual leaders who will enhance the fight against ISIL, not entire teams of soldiers, if you will. So in that effort, it's got a different outcome in mind, a different approach, one we think that will be more successful by dealing with these vetted individuals. We think there will be a way for them to for us to establish those connections with those individuals, and again, get the groups that they represent more involved in the fight without having to train up a significant number of people. So it's different in that regard.
So the money, the $349 million, would go to helping equip the units or the personnel that these selected individuals would hopefully muster.
Tony, I don't have the exact breakdown right here, exactly what this $349 million would be spent on, but you can be sure that part of that will include the training of these individuals and the resources necessary to do that, the resources necessary to support the U.S. personnel will be providing that training. But I don't have an exact breakdown for this $349 million.
Another budget question. The House Armed Services Committee has acted on the 2017 defense bill. The Appropriators act on it on Wednesday. The Senate acts on it later this week. Are there sections in the House Armed Services Committee legislation that the Secretary would feel compelled to recommend a veto to the President on if they remained in the final budget, in the final bill?
Well, Tony, you just talked about a process that is underway up on Capitol Hill, and we're going to be respectful of that process. We're still early at this point, but the Secretary, I think, has made pretty clear he has problems with some components of what's in the House legislation, particularly with regard to the dollars and the use of the contingency funds, the OCO funds, and I think he's made his concerns about that readily apparent, but it's too soon to be talking about veto threats and things like that. There's a process that needs to be followed here. We're early in that process. We look forward to working with Congress and trying to address the Secretary's concerns and end up with a product that serves our warfighter and maintains the budget certainty that the Secretary has identified.
The shift of the $18 billion of OCO back into the base budget, is that potentially veto material? Again,
Tony, the Secretary's made his views on this clear. We're early in the process. It's too soon to be talking about veto threats. This is a much larger bill with a whole host of components to it, components that are critically important to this department, critically important to America's warfighters. We'd like to work with Congress and make this a successful end result, something that we can be supportive of and they can be supportive of as well. Lucas.
Peter, does the Secretary have a reaction to the Army Times story saying the Army right now is being cut to the lowest level since World War II? And my question is, how does the Pentagon justify these cuts in light of the rising threats from Russia, who has threatened to put more divisions along the border with Eastern Europe, China is militarizing the South China Sea, and now Iran, just in the past few weeks, has launched another ballistic missile violation? How do you justify these cuts to the U.S. Army?
Well, let me talk big picture here. The budget that the Secretary has presented, that he's worked on closely, collaboratively with the services, including the Army, represents a budget that puts priorities on where the Secretary believes we should be spending our money. That is readiness. That is, of course, innovation, making sure America's warfighters have what they need today and in the future. And this was done collaboratively with the Army, with General Milley. And again, this is a budget environment in which we're given a top-line number, the budget agreement. And the Secretary, working closely with his top leadership and with the leadership of the services, has come up with moved a budget forward that he's confident reflects our priorities, our needs at this time, given the budget environment that we're in, and that, again, everybody wishes we had more dollars to spend if that was possible. But this is a budget agreement that we have to operate in, and this represented the best case, the best plan to put forward with regard to the nation's defense within those budget frameworks.
General Milley was just on Capitol Hill a month ago saying that these cuts, he can't even deploy two-thirds of the Army in a time of crisis, and that if forced to deploy troops in crisis, that to expect more U.S. casualties. Is the Secretary satisfied in that kind of answer and the strength and size of the U.S. Army right now?
Again, tough decisions were made in this budget. This reflects a budget that has the nation's security interests in mind, given the budget realities, and he's confident that what is presented here and what he's worked with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, including Chairman Dunford, represents a plan that, if it's approved by Congress, would allow for the protection of the United States. And again, this is a budget environment, Lucas, that you've covered, is different. We had a budget agreement that set a top-line number, and this reflects the kind of investments we need right now in readiness, in force structure, and in innovation for the future that reflects the right balance in the Secretary's mind.
On Tony's question, in this budget, the Congress has planned to ask the Pentagon to halt these cuts to the Army. Would the Secretary support that, to stop these cuts right now?
Again, we're going to let this process play out. It's early in the process up on Capitol Hill. We're not going to judge it at this moment in time. We want to see what the finished product looks like and continue to work with members of Congress and identify those areas that are critically important to us. This is really important for our warfighters and for the certainty that they deserve. And we're going to continue to work with members of Congress through this process.
Finally, I noticed in your opening announcements you didn't say anything about VE Day. Did not think it was important to say something about the 71st anniversary?
It is important. Thank you for reminding me. It is an important day in history. A lot of things going on today, and that did slip from my original list. But I did notice some of the observations around the world today. So thank you for that, Lucas. Joe.
Peter, I want to go back to the announcement about the killing of the ISIL leader.
Yes.
Could you give us more details? How was this operation conducted? Was it a drone or an aircraft? Also, what's the importance of killing, his name is Abu Wahib, what you said. And do you know the number of ISIL leaders who have been killed, targeted by the coalition since the beginning of the year?
On that last question, I do not have that exact answer. I can try and get you an answer after this, if possible. But I think it's fair to say that ISIL leadership has been hit hard by coalition efforts, and this is another example of that. It is dangerous to be an ISIL leader in Iraq and Syria these days, and for good reason. We want to apply pressure to ISIL on as many fronts as possible, and taking out leadership targets is one way to do that, and we've been very successful, and this is another example of that. Anbar Province, as you know, is an area critically important to the fight against ISIL, and the fact that we've now taken out the military emir of Anbar Province is going to harm ISIL's ability to conduct operations there. Is it alone, is taking out leadership alone sufficient in this fight? Absolutely not. But it is one part of a multi-pronged effort to apply pressure on as many fronts to ISIL, and for ISIL leaders to be very worried about their next step.
On ISIL also, could you tell us what's the status of relations between this department and the YPG right now? Do you have, if you could explain to us what's the status of relationship with
we continue to support forces in Syria that have been successful in taking the fight to ISIL, and we've worked with Arab forces, with Kurdish forces, with Turkmen as well, and so there are groups that have been successful in taking the fight to ISIL. That's one of them, but our work specifically has been with a range of different groups, as you know, in Syria, and we'll continue to support those forces on the ground that are being successful.
When you say forces in Syria, you mean YPG is part of these forces, correct?
The YPG is on the ground in Syria. I think their efforts against ISIL have been documented, but they're not the only force taking the fight to ISIL, and we've been successful in establishing ties with some of those other forces. Paul.
Back on this, the reports out of Iran that they had the third ballistic missile test since the Iranian nuclear deal. There are sort of differing reports on that. Can you confirm that the third test, this test, did in fact take place, and give us your comment on what that means?
We're aware of those reports. I cannot confirm that they took place from this podium right here. But I think consistent with what we've said in the past, Iran has to abide by UN resolutions with regard to ballistic missile tests, and if they have violated or not been consistent with those resolutions, that clearly would be a concern for us. And we've said from the start that the nuclear deal is one aspect of the relationship with Iran, one particular set of issues there. But there are a whole host of other Iranian actions which we find destabilizing, and their malign activity remains a significant concern to the United States, the Department of Defense, and we're going to continue to do what we need to do to address those malign activities in an appropriate fashion.
So you're saying the Pentagon isn't paying attention to whether Iran actually conducted a ballistic missile test?
No, I'm not going to. I'm telling you, I can't from here confirm the details of a ballistic missile test from here.
But you're watching.
Of course, we're watching everything the Iranians are doing. I'm just not in a position to confirm for you your specific question right there. Yes, Jenny.
Thank you, Peter. Yesterday, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un suggested South and North Korea military talks, and he also wanted to stop conduct U.S. and South Korea military exercises in Korean Peninsula. What is your comment on this?
Well, we are, of course, closely allied with South Korea and have been for some time, and will continue to maintain our defense relationship with the South Koreans given the threat posed by North Korea. And until there's some reason for us to reassess that, we're going to continue to do everything we need to bolster the security of our South Korean allies and, of course, to look out for U.S. national security interests with regard to the Korean Peninsula. Yes?
Do you have any update on HIMARS to Turkey?
I do not have an update for you. Let me take that question for you, see if we have, my understanding was there may have been still some time before that was going to be finalized. So I will take that question and see if we have a calendar update for you.
And also Turkey's President Erdogan has recently said that Turkey has been left alone in the fight against ISIS, noting the recent rocket launch into the southern cities and also the suicide bombs. Do you have any additional offers to Turkey with respect to their fight against ISIS or securing the border?
Well, of course, this is an ongoing conversation that we're having with our ally Turkey, our NATO ally Turkey, about what's happening along the border, the threats facing Turkey. So this is a conversation where there are U.S. officials in regular contact with Turkey about those security concerns. What else can be done to further take on ISIL in Iraq and Syria and in a way that protect the homelands of our allies like Turkey? So this is an ongoing conversation, and obviously we want to do what we can to make Turkey feel as safe and secure as possible, and this is something that we'll continue to work with the Turkish government on.
So there was a report yesterday saying that Turkey and the U.S. have agreed on helping Syrian Democratic Force to take control of these 98 kilometers, the Manbij pocket, and clear this area of Daesh elements. But Turkey claimed certain conditions, like put certain conditions for this agreement, saying that the leadership of SDF taking control of that area should be Turkmen or Arab, Syrian Arab, rather than the YPG elements. Do you have any kind of, aware of any kind of conversations between Turkey and the U.S. with respect to the taking or clearing these 98 kilometers of Daesh?
Well, I mean, it just as we were just talking about, obviously we have concerns for Turkey and the threat ISIL poses to Turkey, including in that part of Syria. So these are ongoing conversations we're having at a significant level with the Turkish government, both the Department of Defense and other members of the U.S. government. But with regard to that particular area, we've identified that area for some time as a place where ISIL has taken root, and anything that can be done to remove ISIL from that part of Syria we think would be significant. Certainly would shore up the effort to prevent foreign fighters from being able to cross that border, and we think anything that can be done to bolster that border security would be important. I'm not going to get into private discussions that we may be having with the Turkish government about exactly how that's being carried out, but we see that goal, and we share the interest that Turkey has in getting rid of ISIL as a threat in that part of Syria.
Could you confirm that at least that there has been some conversation about who will take control of that area? Just I'm not talking about.
Again, I'm not going to get into specific operational details about coalition operations in that area. And I'll leave it to the Turkish government to speak to their concerns there. But this is something again, we've identified, we believe other coalition allies have identified as a critical area in the fight against ISIL, and retaking that area and securing that area, particularly that border, would be a significant forward movement in the fight against ISIL, and in particular in the dealing with the concerns about foreign fighters. We think that'd be a significant step forward. Courtney.
Details about the Abu Wahib strike. Was it a U.S. aircraft? Was it manned? Was it a drone? Where was he? And I think you said there were 3 other fighters he was with at the time. Where were they? Were they in a vehicle? Were they in a building?
Yeah,
How long was the U.S. watching him? Any kind of details about the strike?
Yeah. I can tell you that it was a coalition aircraft, but I can't get into more detail right here because I don't have it all in front of me, for one. And he was with 3 other individuals in a vehicle. And again, we think this is a significant member of the leadership team, particularly in a critical area right now in the fight against ISIL, Anbar province. And this happened near Rutba in Anbar province.
Did the U.S. military classify him as the most senior ISIS fighter or leader in Anbar?
I know that, again, he's been referred to as the emir of Anbar province. Whether or not there are others higher ranking, I just know that we view him as a significant leader in ISIL leadership overall, not just in Anbar province. And so we think this is removing him from the battlefield will be a significant step forward.
I know this is, I think, the 4th time that he's been reported dead. I don't think the U.S. has ever confirmed him, but the 4th time in the past 2 years or so that he's been reported dead. Can you give us any sense of how you know for sure he's dead? I mean, is it just that the vehicle blew up, and is there any talk of potentially releasing the video of it? And then one more thing, the first couple times he was reported dead, there were some reports that he had been a prisoner at Camp Bucca and escaped in the 2002 or 2012 big prisoner breakout, Al-Qaeda breakout. Do you have any confirmation on that? Do you know if that's the case?
Let me take that last question for you. I know that he had a history in Al-Qaeda in Iraq previously, and so let me take that question for you. In terms of our confidence level, we're confident that this was a successful strike, and I'll leave it at that.
And releasing the video? Is there any consideration to release the video?
I'll take that question as well. Other questions? Yes, Michael.
Peter, after 15 years in Afghanistan, why are operators having difficulty with the ROEs? And I've heard from people out there directly that there's still a lot of confusion, and that if the operators are not in there fighting with the Afghans, who apparently are running away half the time, that Kabul will fall within 3 days. And as well as other areas that they're securing. The question, I guess, is why? What they feel like they're out there, but they don't know what the mission is any longer. Do you all have any insights as to where this is all heading after 2017?
Well, let me just tell you where we are right now, and I think this is something that certainly General Nicholson has spoken to in his time there so far. You've heard from General Cleveland as well, if you were here last week. The role of those forces, resolute support, is to train, advise, and assist the Afghan forces. The effort here is to try and allow Afghan forces to take control and secure their own country. They have made progress over the last few months towards that effort. Certainly the unity government and the formation of the unity government was a positive step that has allowed Afghan security forces to take further advances, but they need additional support. We've seen from the last year evidence of that, and the purpose of those U.S. forces is to get them to a position where they can defend themselves, but not to be the lead in the fight, to be in a support role. And that is a challenge for our forces in terms of that training mission and getting Afghan forces to a position where they can defend themselves.
Well, I understand that they're under instructions they can't be firing on the Taliban. If the Taliban is increasingly joining with either Al-Qaeda or ISIS, which appears to be the case now, why aren't these forces that are shooting at our guys allowed to engage and with with a lot of vigor and.
Well, you know, U.S. forces always have the right to defend themselves, of course, and this is.
Why are they still wondering are confused by the rules of engagement? Then I don't understand that.
Well, I'm not sure exactly which.
Apparently, a Pentagon report that just came out that cited this confusion, the question of, I mean, there's a New York Times story today, Reuters just carried a story on it, and it seems as though after 15 years it should be crystal clear what the ROEs are.
We're in a different position today as compared to when our forces first arrived in Afghanistan. They're in a different role. They're performing a challenging, difficult responsibility that oftentimes or can put them in harm's way. We are asking a lot of U.S. forces right now, but those rules of engagement, as I think General Nicholson has explained, those authorities are as clear as they can be right now for those forces, the particular role they're in right now. And I think this is something that obviously we're constantly reassessing, constantly talking to the Afghan government and leadership about the most effective way for our forces to support Afghan forces. And I think that's a conversation that you'll be hearing more from General Nicholson on in the not too distant future, and something that we're looking at, again, on a daily basis. Louis.
Last week we heard that there were U.S. Special Forces that returned to Yemen. Are they still in country, and what's the expectation for how long they're going to remain there?
Well, I think as Captain Davis told you last week, there's a small contingent of U.S. forces that have been operating in a liaison with the coalition activities in Mukalla, and they are still in country, still providing that liaison role, in particular in support of intelligence sharing, and they continue to perform that role.
Is there any visibility as to how long they may be there?
It's going to be a limited period of time, but I don't have a particular deadline to share with you at this time.
And would the deadline be the War Powers Act that requires, congressional authorization for them to remain?
This was going to be a short duration operation, a short duration support. So obviously we're going to comply with whatever rules and are required for their operation in Yemen. Yes.
Just briefly, could you talk about why you all decided to put some boots on the ground for this particular operation? I mean, there's been other activities in Yemen over the past several years that didn't require boots on the ground. What was it about this particular situation, this particular coalition, its operations against this port town that led to that decision?
Well, it's the target of these operations that is most important. It's AQAP. And AQAP remains a significant security threat to the United States and to our regional partners. And we welcome this effort to specifically remove AQAP from this part of Yemen. And our support is particularly designed to support that. I've tired you guys out? All right. Lucas, Tony, and then I'm going to head out of here.
Peter, are you concerned about some of the Russian advances in their military hardware, particularly in aviation, like the T-50, it's a stealth fighter, as well as some of their other systems? They're rolling out the S-500 missile system that supposedly can shoot down some of our stealth fighters and maybe even shoot down satellites?
Lucas, this sort of brings me back to one of your earlier questions about our budget and what's reflected in our budget, and that includes investments in weaponry, lethal weaponry that we think can serve our warfighters in the future, and investing in technology that will keep us ahead of potential adversaries in the future. So obviously we've been watching carefully what other countries are doing in terms of their investments, and the United States is not going to, the Department of Defense is not going to sit still. We, for years, have had technology and innovation that has supported our warfighters, and we're going to continue to do that, and this budget reflects advancements in the kinds of capabilities we think we need in order to deter potential adversaries in the future.
Finally, any reaction to Russia's big military parade today in Moscow?
No particular reaction. I did not catch the parade, but I understand it was quite substantial.
Quick question. On the Anbar strike, did
Yes.
the Expeditionary Targeting Force have anything to do with directing the airstrike?
Tony, I'm not going to get into operational details. This was carried out by coalition aircraft.
No ground support from the Expeditionary Targeting Force?
I'm not going to get into what went into the targeting. It was a successful strike, and it was, again, carried out by coalition aircraft.
The annual China report, is that going to come out this week, or what's the status of that?
Let me check on that. I know that, let me check on, take that question. I don't have a particular deadline right now, a particular date for its release, but I do not think it's going to happen this week, but I'll check on that.
It's usually due on March 1st. That's normally the congressional deadline, so.
I will note that, and I will check on the status of that report.
You're in California.
Yes. Okay. One more in the back, and then I got to go.
Just back on Russia. Today in the morning, Senator Nunn said that the bridges with Russia should be kept open in terms of the nuclear threat, and then said that because the potential threat is still over there. Are these channels are open, or how are you managing the nuclear threat with Russia? You know.
Well, I mean, I think you've heard the Secretary talk about approaching Russia in a strong and balanced way, and that means, again, making clear our concerns about Russian actions in places like Ukraine, Russian aggressive activities, at the same time being balanced and open to the notion of working with Russia where our interests align. And this is one area where, again, I think our interests have aligned in the past. The Nunn-Lugar cooperation, that effort to reduce the threat of nuclear weapons and the stockpile of nuclear weapons is an example of successful cooperation with Russia in the past. And I think the Senator made a good point that even though we may disagree with Russia on a whole host of areas, there may be other areas where our interests do align. Certainly reducing the threat of nuclear weapons getting into the wrong hands is an area where we and Russia share an interest. And I think you made a very good point, one that's consistent, I think, with what you've heard from the Secretary. All right, thanks, everybody.